Hey, boys and girls, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on when you're listening. I am Nancy A. Shenker, the geezerproofer. And this show, as you know or may not know, is dedicated to helping people become beezers, somebody who be curious, be in the moment, be active, as opposed to geezers. And geezers are people who are stuck at any age. But the general idea of this show is to inspire you all to be badasses after 50 or whatever age you happen to be, approaching 50, thinking about turning 50, or know that you'll be 50 someday. And the reality is by the year 2050, there will be 4 million of us who are over 100, the centenarians. So if you're 50 now, that means you have another potentially 50 years left to decide who and what you want to be. So today's guest is a 3-timer. He doesn't get a special jacket or a badge.
I should like on SNL.
Exactly. Maybe for the 5th appearance, you'll get a jacket, a Brian Howie jacket. But Brian Howie is the owner and CEO and manager of Podpopuli, where I record, and he has been, as he calls it, a podfather to me because he has been podcasting for more than 10 years. In fact, one of my other episodes with him is all about the basics of podcasting for those of you who are thinking of launching your own podcast. So today, and I always love surprising Brian with the topic, and then we just kind of go from there. It's basically about, are we capable of change after 50? And what kind of change are we capable of? So scientific research shows that there is a population known as the cognitive superagers, who are people over 50 who are able to keep their brains really super flexible. And this whole notion of neuroplasticity, of being able to change the shape and the makeup of your brain, is a real thing, either through use of chemicals or through a bunch of other things. So I did find a list, and we always like the little quiz question part of my episodes with Brian, is name 3 things that you think have an impact on brain change at any age.
Substance abuse.
Actually, it's funny. That's not on the list. It probably should be.
Environment. I think where you live would change that. I think your relationship would or should change that.
Interesting.
I mean, physically change or do the thing, because when you talk to alcoholics, they say that the one of the biggest challenges to overcoming that is that their brain went through that. It's like stretching out a sweater. And it's hard to get it back the way it, quote unquote, should be.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, these were a lot more basic. They were things like exercise, sleep, meditation, coffee, which was good news for me, reading, music, nature. Multitasking, they said, is a negative because if you multitask too often, it actually impedes your ability to focus and
this is over
information.
50?
This is at any age.
Oh, at any age. Okay.
Sugar, which I know for a fact is true, and believing that you can change is the first step in that process.
You brought up the and we'll get back to this in a second. You brought up the centenarian. Is that what it's called? Do you know how old the oldest person is right now, as far as they know?
107?
111.
Cool.
Well, not that old. Like, that hasn't changed with all the advances and with all the everything, and people are we're going to live this long or whatever. 50 years ago, the oldest person was 110. The ceiling has not gone up.
But there are many more people.
There are, but they're all cramming up against the ceiling. Like, I'm surprised nobody's like 130. It just hasn't happened.
Yeah, I think what will happen, and again, this is just my layperson's theory, is that as the population ages, researchers will have more of an incentive to develop tools and techniques to keep people living longer, better lives.
When you talk to people, though, who are going through that, not to change your topic here, but
most
people do not want to go much past 90. Right. They just don't. And so so you brought up on the wanting to make a change or most people, their will is gone. They just, even if you're 102, you don't feel great. And this is not that and so the key, I think, would be to, like, from 70 to 90, slow that down enough so that your 90s and so on are not, you don't physically, it's not miserable.
Right. But actually, that is the whole gestalt, I love that word, of my podcast, is that being over 60 doesn't have to be miserable.
Right.
I mean, I am closer to 70 than I am to 60. And after I leave the studio today, I'm going to work out for 30, 40 minutes.
That's good.
And I'm not eating sugar, and I'm keeping a positive attitude. And I travel not quite as much as you do, but I travel and explore a lot. So I do think that people who get miserable as they get older have made a conscious decision to age and be miserable.
Crotchetiness will age you.
Exactly. Yeah. So the other thing that I pulled from the internet, the source of all truths, are what they lay out as the 6 pillars of making change. So the first one is self-reflection, that you have to actually want to make a change.
Right.
And you're over 50, so what kinds of things have prompted you to make changes in your own life?
2 things. This is a good question. Looking backwards and trying to say, what did I do? Why didn't this happen? So I never look backwards with regret. I have no regret about anything, any forks in the road. I feel like for the most part, I took the right one. But I have to look at certain relationships, certain situationships, certain things or whatever. And a lot of that came down to having an inability to listen. I was not aware that a woman might want to be heard. I was not aware that, I grew up in a yelling house. And so the raised voices had a sense of normalcy to me, which not a lot of people are not like that. So it's not an effective way to communicate. And mostly having a handful of people, it took me, not until I was 50s, but into my 40s, where a couple of people professionally and personally believed in me the way that I guess had never believed in myself or nobody around me had. And that gave me the confidence to change everything in a way that I had never even considered.
Yeah. And even professionally, just, sort of having talked to you, 7, 8 years ago, and you were running the Great Love Debate, and that was your primary business, and then seeing you become a business mogul.
It's still my primary business.
I know, but the fact that you now own all of these podcasting studios, sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to look in and go, oh, okay, this was the Brian Howie of 10 years ago.
That's another good point.
Your innards may be the same.
My desire to help other people share their voice had to be rooted in me willing to turn down my own.
Yes.
And
you said it, not me.
True. No, it's true. And I became quote unquote the talent fairly late in my showbiz career. Like I was in my 40s before I sort of moved out from behind the camera and did all that kind of stuff. And that the impetus to change was having 2 very specific people see something that nobody else had seen or express it to me in a way that nobody else had expressed. Sometimes people say things over and over and you're either not ready to hear these things, which is what you brought up, or they're not said in a way that you can absorb and comprehend and make a difference. And so you're talking about a relationship, your first wife might have said exactly the same thing that your 4th wife did, and you were not ready to absorb it, or it wasn't sent in a tone or even an environment where your confidence to make a change could flourish. And that is the key, I think. Yeah,
I remember when I was going through my divorce, I said that I took 50% of the responsibility for the fact that our marriage didn't work out. And someone said, oh, why don't you just take 48 or 49%? I'm like, why? Is there a prize? Like, do I win something? Like, I am willing to own my role, which I think is back to that self-reflection, and to your point, I had to do a fair amount of work on myself and unpack my childhood to say, all right, is someone actually attacking me when they are contrarian, or am I just hearing it as an attack because it's a trigger that dates back 60 years? So being able to sort of muzzle yourself. In fact, an executive coach once told me I should just go like this. If I'm in a meeting and I'm tempted to say something, it's almost like putting a soft muzzle on so that I don't blurt something out, and I learn to listen and pause.
Yeah. Putting sort of the we call the poetry between the lines, meaning there's a gap of thought and reflection and hesitation sometimes to act or react in a moment or a conversation that hopefully we all get a little bit better as we get older. But a lot of times people, I've heard a lot of women say that men are so set in their ways in their 50s. Men are set in their ways in their 20s. And there is always, I believe, a woman, if she says it in the right way, with the right incentive and the right tone, can get him to do anything, can get him to change in any way. And a lot of women believe I shouldn't have to do that. Well, I'm not a trainer. I'm like, well, you go to a physical fitness trainer. I mean, you there's lots of people. You can look at it as a coach, but you can basically look at it as somebody's giving a man or and this can work with a woman too, a roadmap to what you need and to be happy. And that is your job, because you guys are all different, like snowflakes. All we know is what the last woman liked, and we probably found that out too late. All we know. So it is the job of the partner to say, here is the bar. I'm going to hold it here, but I'm going to show you how to get there in order to get into my life.
And it's a man's choice to say, I really would like to become a better partner, a better man. Or there are guys who will just say, no, this has served me well for 65 years.
Well, what do I get if I'm a better partner? That is, what is the pot of gold at the rainbow if I do this? And that is on, if you do this, there's going to be a world of cookies for you. You can jump up and get the cheese all you want. But sometimes it's because that's what I said, or that's what I like, or whatever. If a woman, instead of saying, oh my God, you're going to wear that Patrick Mahomes jersey to dinner again, that's going to be contentious. But if she just said, remember that blue suit you wore last year on Easter? Can you wear that again? Can you wear that?
Yeah,
you look so hot.
Really hot. Exactly.
Done. He will do that. There's ways, we need the pat on the nose for insecure men goes so much farther than the smack on the nose. We get way more smacks on the nose.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And you hit on something really important and this is the second thing on this list of 6 things to do to make change, is to set clear goals. So if I really want a boyfriend, which some days I think I do and some days I think I don't, but if I really want a boyfriend, there's certain things that I will need to do if I want a partner in my life.
Which you do. Everybody does. People just sometimes think partner, they think of the bad parts. I don't want a bad boyfriend. I don't want a boyfriend. They that makes me unhappy or whatever. But if you're okay, here is a document. And if you sign this here, I'm going to have a notary sign it, whatever. And if you sign this, I can guarantee you a happy, loving, sharing relationship. Everybody would choose that. They just don't trust the document.
Right. And it also is a matter of, are the things, if someone says to me, I have 4 dogs and they're going to sleep in the bed with me, that is something that, I probably would never really like. Would I try it? Yeah, maybe if I really loved somebody.
You have to make the bed experience more appealing than the 4 dogs.
Right. I get that.
That's the thing. If you can make my bed feel better with you in it than the 4 dogs, game on. So it's not you against the dogs.
But then it also requires the other person to set, there are people, men and women, who are absolutists that I will never give up.
Those are the people that are not open to the change. And I think those are unhappy people.
Yeah.
And the absolutists are unhappy.
One of my questions is what I call my, yellow card question. I wouldn't ask it on a first date or a first meeting, but I would certainly ask it on a second or third date, is, have you ever been in therapy? Would you ever consider going to therapy? And if they say, oh, absolutely not, therapy is bullshit, then they're probably not the right person for me. Even if I said, oh, I always hated therapy too, or the concept, but I did it and it completely changed my life.
Well, what if you eliminated the term therapy and you replaced it with
Counseling?
Self-improvement, working on, doing some work, like something like that. Not everybody wants to do therapy because not everybody can afford therapy. And some people do think therapy is bullshit. I am not one of those people. I'm a big fan of therapy, but I understand the other side of it. And there are ways to get to the same end game if it's not specifically therapy. So
I think that's a great point.
I would broaden that.
Yeah. And then it's really creating a plan. If you want to make change, say, all right, I always think about, that old Life cereal commercial where like they made Mikey eat it and he liked it. Or, there's a great episode with John Belushi and Sissy Spacek where she serves him fruit slaw and it's new food and he goes ballistic. And he does a food fight as only John Belushi could do one. And in the fight, he ends up with some of the fruit slaw on his mouth. And he goes, oh, this is really good. Yeah. So I think we all need to be a little bit uncomfortable before we can get comfortable.
People get stuck in their ways on religion. I need to be somebody in the same religion as me. And I always try and break down why. No, I need somebody who has the same values. I'm like, values is not religion. And if you want to say that it is, most religions have exactly the same values. Well, I need somebody who believes the things I do. Well, some you do or don't. What you really want is somebody who shares the same traditions, habits, 2 hours on Sunday, the same way you do.
And for someone like me, it really is all about the beezerishness. I coined a new phrase there. That if you be curious, if you be open to change, If
you're 62, what do you care if they're Baptist?
Exactly.
And you're Lutheran. Who cares? I don't understand.
And I golfed once in my life. I didn't particularly like it, but if I was with somebody who was a diehard golfer, I'd say, I'll try it again, because the downside of trying or doing something that your significant other likes, it's relatively low table stakes.
I'm a big New York Giants fan. And for, 32 years in a row, I had never, ever missed one Giant game. 32 years in a row. And sometimes they were good and sometimes they were bad, and it was just a routine. And my girlfriend at the time said, one weekend, one Sunday, will you not watch the game and give me a chance to show you that there's other things to do? And I go, that I'm going to like better? And she goes, I'm not even getting that far. I go, will you just do this for me? Consider it whatever. I did, and it changed everything. And it made me think oh my God, I've been sitting in a dark LA bar 4 hours, 10 o'clock in the morning, every time. And I'm like, and we went to a winery in Santa Barbara. And I was like, oh my God, this was, I'm trying to check the score and I'm thinking about it more than halfway through. It was such a nice day. And she knew, she basically was like, I have to make this great. Not necessarily better than football. I just have to make this a fun day that he'll forget about it. And it changed everything. I'm just like, it's not an absolute anymore. It's not like this is what I have to do. It got me out of a routine and a habit and a fear of missing out. And, I still mostly do that, but if something comes up, it's not an absolute anymore. And she just had to present it to me in a way that give me a chance to show you that there's better things. She was right.
And you also had to be the kind of person that had at least this much of an open aperture in your brain.
Hot. So, it was very enticing. The way she said it, though, it was super sincere. And it wasn't like, why do you have to do this? Can't we do something that I want to do? That was the approach probably many others have taken. And she put it in a way with a smile and a wink and a fun that she knew appealed to me. And she was right.
Yeah, and you have to really get to know somebody and what buttons to push on both ends to really get to that point. So seeking support, we've already talked about. So that's item number. So it's self-reflection, setting goals, creating a plan, seeking support, which is if you fundamentally want to make change, you just get an accountability buddy. I love the analogy you just drew of having a personal trainer. If I want my arms sculpted, I know I can't do that on my own. I'm going to have somebody standing over me, making me swing a kettlebell.
Yeah, and having somebody want to make a change. Whenever I have somebody on my podcast talk about this, okay, well, what's the first step? And sometimes they're literally, it's the first step. Just go walk somewhere different.
Right.
And sometimes that's true. You just kind of have to shake up everybody's snow globe.
And then it's cultivating self-discipline and self-care, which is basically, getting yourself in the right headspace and the right body space, doing a lot of those things that I just talked about. which gets you in that mode of being able to make change. And then the last one is, it's an article from Psychology Today. So of course it's going to be kind of pop psych, but it's celebrating your progress, which is, what you and I are kind of doing here is saying, all right, this is episode number 26 out of...
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Good for you.
It's very
You're halfway through a year.
Auspicious, exactly.
Which is good.
And I'm already planning on renewing for another year.
People like, milestones. 30 days, 365 days, 1 hour to people like tangible, 12 steps, all of these things that people are like, if I do something for a certain amount of time, something will hopefully happen.
Oh yeah. And if I look back on my very first episode or even our first interview, which is why I really felt compelled to have you as my halfway mark guest. I think
I'm in the halfway house. Yeah.
But you and I were both very different on air today than we were on that first episode. And
we were?
Yeah, I would encourage people to listen to this episode and then go back and listen to that episode.
Isn't a conversation a conversation?
It is, but it's like a dance where if both people feel this need to lead, then you end up stepping on each other's toes.
I think you're more confident in leading now. I don't think it's about the other person. I think you're like, I know how to do this. I know how to drive this car.
Yeah,
it's your show.
But that also took my getting to know you as a person and knowing this is going to, now we're all going to start to cry. There's going to be a Barbara Walters moment. No, I don't think Brian Howie ever cries, at least not in public. But I definitely get the sense that, you were also in an earlier stage of building out this business. I was at a different stage in getting my feet wet in podcasting. So confidence is not something where you can drink a shot of confidence water and all of a sudden be a different person. You have to go through that process. And something I've realized along the way is that words of affirmation is tied for number one as a love language along with physical touch.
Well, the way I do it with... whether I work with actors and actresses when I'm directing or even podcasters, I try and bring it back to, if somebody says this is my first time doing anything, I try and figure out a way to convince them actually you've done this before, or you've done 90% of the elements before. And that takes the fear out of it. Like somebody came in here yesterday and they're like, this is my first podcast. And I go, have you had a conversation before? And they're like, yeah. I go, well, it's the same. And that was like, oh yeah, it's not so technical and it's not so confusing to people. And you can do that with anything that let us know that maybe you didn't do this in a long time, maybe you don't do this regularly, but 80% of the elements we're talking about, you got a lot of experience with. And that, takes the fear down. And you can do that in a relationship when you're trying to convince, massage, manipulate, shift your partner in a different direction that they think is getting out of their comfort zone, that actually they have a lot more experience. Oh, you haven't been in my bed with 4 dogs? Have you been in bed with 2 dogs? It's kind of like that.
Well, the other thing that I realized as I've gone down this podcast road is the first couple of times I did it, I got my hair and makeup done and I was really consumed with how I looked on camera. Yeah. And if you're listening and as opposed to watching today, I'll do the visual for you. I'm actually wearing my gym clothes today. And yeah, I did put on a little makeup.
Put on chapstick.
Yeah, I'm wearing some lip gloss, but I really don't give a shit anymore about how I look because I came to realize that having a pooch, having some wrinkles is just part of getting older. And why am I masking all of that?
Well, I mean, unless you're going to get dialed up every second, I mean, all the world's a stage, the old line, like people are out and there are cameras everywhere and you either have to go all or nothing and just kind of accept it. I don't think anybody's going to turn off if you don't have full makeup on. No. And I don't think anybody's going to turn on if you have full makeup on. It is what it is. They're going to come on here for hopefully what you have to say.
Yeah. And speaking of which, the podcast is really starting to take off. And I'll give you a little plug and I'll let you expound on that. I started working with what at the time was not officially Podpopulized marketing division, but that has been a game changer for me because no matter how strong your personal brand is and how confident you are in what you're doing, it's always helpful to have another person slicing and dicing your video.
Second set of eyes, for sure. Yeah, people know, just because it's what I like or what my inner circle likes, you're casting out a big net with a podcast.
Yeah. And it ties back to what we were talking about before, is building enough trust with other people in your life to say, okay, what can I really improve on? And I've done that actually with both my daughters. And, I've had a tense relationship with both or one of them at various times. And I just spent a week with my older daughter and her kids at Disney. And we did have one moment of conflict, but we were able to work it out with record speed. And for me, it was really gratifying to say, okay, both of us, we're the same people, but we've changed the way that we communicate with each other to solve a problem.
Were you at Disneyland or Disney World?
Disney World. So
that's Disney.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And all of its non-glory. I mean, it really gives you a perspective on who lives in America today and what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And it was always
what they're eating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I knew that I'd created a monster when I asked my 6-year-old grandson what his favorite food was. And he said, an all-you-can-eat buffet.
I know. In Vegas now, they have the buffet of buffets, meaning you can get a pass to hit all of the buffets in 48 hours, which is insane. I was at Disney World a couple years ago, and I saw a guy with a churro in one hand and the giant turkey leg in the other hand.
And
God bless you.
Speaking of sugar, some of these kids are getting so amped up on crap, it's like their parents are giving them crystal meth and letting them loose.
It's a huge problem, the food we consume and what's in our food we consume. That's why, you can go on an Italian vacation and eat all you want, and they don't have the crap in the food, and you're not going to get that much weight.
I've become a big Blue Zones fan. That's, the key to living to 100.
Yeah.
Not a huge fan of the purple sweet potato. I tried it. I really wanted to like it, but not so much.
I do like it. It's edible.
All right. Well, I might try it again.
Yeah.
If the right person suggests it.
Have you had a regular sweet potato?
Oh, yeah. I love regular sweet potato.
So you have to think 80% of this I'm familiar with.
Exactly. So
load it up with crap. It'll taste better.
So just tell our listening audience, speaking of change and evolution, what is the latest at Pod Populi? You can do your little infomercial, and then I'll do mine.
Whether you have a podcast, existing podcast, you want to start a podcast, or you want to grow your podcast. Now we have a whole lot of offering services, professionals, coaching, creativity that can help you find your voice and share your message and reach your goals. So we've really spent a lot of time in the last year really trying to figure out, okay, not just enable people to podcast, but how that podcast can benefit them, whatever their goals are. Well, some people want to make money off podcasts. Some people want to have a voice with a podcast. Some people want to meet members of their tribe, and a good podcast audience feels like a community. And so we're figuring out a whole bunch of different ways to bring community together.
And it's been really great. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who want to podcast, and they run out and they buy a microphone and headphones and a ring light. Yeah. And it reminds me of that episode of Seinfeld when Kramer gets the Merv Griffin set and starts a talk show in his apartment. And again, this is just me.
It's hard. I mean,
I have no desire to learn AV production.
Well, once you go to dry bar, you're never going to blow dry your own hair. It's a better experience,
Oh, yeah. And if you have a day job where you actually make money from your day job, I can honestly say this is the most efficient way to get a podcast off the ground, because all you do is show up, mic up, record, and then get on your merry way.
I started this business because I didn't want to record my own podcast.
Yeah, and they do the editing for you.
I don't know how to edit.
Yeah, and now with your marketing services, I have this woman, Kelly, and her team.
She'll blow you up.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But, you and I know, have had some heated debates about this. My ultimate goal is becoming a real inspirational voice in the aging community, potentially getting a guest slot on a reality TV show.
Aren't we all in an aging community?
We are, but some people have different...
We're all special needs children.
Yes, but some people have different philosophies, and it's funny. I'm speaking at a retreat in May, and Diana Place, who's running the retreat, was a guest on my podcast. And it's for women who want to find themselves, whereas I already feel like I've been found. I'm no longer lost. And maybe that's because I'm a little older. Maybe it's because I worked in corporate life before I went out on my own.
Or maybe it's because you're happy where you are.
Yeah. Imagine
Some
that.
people are lost because they have nowhere to be. Some people say they like to travel, like me, because they're not that happy at home. And if you're happy, because a lot of people want to date that way. Like, I need somebody who loves to travel. You need to give them a reason to stick around, you know?
I know. I'm grappling with that now because I do love to travel and explore, but I would like to do it with somebody.
Yeah.
And that's a tough nut to crack because you need to be able to find somebody who has the financial wherewithal and the flexibility in their own life and job to be able to just take off.
Tomorrow, will be my 6th day in a row on an airplane. Traveling sucks.
Yeah. I mean, if you do too much of it, I just came back on Friday from Miami and Disney, and then I don't leave again until the 17th. So I really do like my little pauses.
Well, it's lovely here.
Yeah, the weather's
We're here in
amazing.
Scottsdale, Arizona. It's the full Scottsdazzle. It's lovely.
Yeah, back to exercising again, eating clean, all the benefits of being at home. So, I think this has been a really great conversation, Brian, just talking about change and what we are capable of changing and how to go about changing.
Yeah.
I just urge you all to aspire to be beezers, people who be capable of change, as opposed to geezers who are stuck. But if you are stuck and that is the way you like to live, that's not bad. Just own it and find somebody else. I mean, I've dated guys who say, I'm a homebody, and my idea of a great evening is cooking dinner together, renting a movie, and hanging out at home. And I know myself well enough to know that after 5 nights of doing that, I will have the itch, not like the
Some
STD
guy says that,
itch.
say, meet me down the end of the street. I'll be naked there. Suddenly you're not a homebody anymore. You dangle the right carrot. We're all subject to change,
Yeah, unless, there are men who, and we had an episode on penis, the power of the penis.
The penis will lead you down the street.
But there are some men whose peni don't work anymore.
Well, then find another part of their anatomy to stimulate.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a whole other episode. I'm going to have my ED doctor back on at some point to talk about getting off the sex train, because there are men and women who they like intimacy, they like hugging, they like words of affirmation, but really like the whole penetration thing
doesn't work for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's over for them. So again, I'm jumping the shark here. So just in closing, we have 25 other episodes to listen to. They're on any channel that you happen to listen to your podcasts on. Apple, Spotify. If you'd like to be a guest, I'm booking now for the spring and summer. So it's thegeezerproofer@gmail.com. Just send me a note with what you would like to talk about. And I'd consider you as a future guest. And so thank you all for listening. Keep on listening. And remember, boys and girls, be a beezer, not a geezer. Peace out.